Entitled woman claimed she owns my house and trespassed on my property with her friends to use my pool. I got everyone towed. Here is what happened. Subscribe to Ripe on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. About 3 years ago, I was finally able to afford my dream home on a beach. It is in an area where a lot of people only vacation for the summer, or the place is rented out for Airbnb and stuff. But I actually live there year round, not just seasonally. I have a job that is remote, so it does not matter. Anyway, my story is about a woman who essentially tried to front to her friends, lying and saying that my house is actually hers. Oh, but it gets even better. Let me first start by saying that my house is truly one of the nicer ones on the strip. It is located right on the beach and I spent a lot of time and effort to keep it nice. My garden is well landscaped and I have a nice clean pool that I am proud of as well. And yes, I work very hard to keep my house looking nice, and it is not that strange to see people admiring it as they walk down the beach. By the way, clearly a very humble OP. Anyway, I should also mention that I don't like to drive. I have an anxiety disorder and getting behind a wheel is terrifying to me, so I simply ride my bike to places. Where we live, there is always nice weather, and with the occasional bout of rain and stores and restaurants very close by, making bike riding completely normal. This means that I never have a car out front to say, hey, someone lives here. One day I had decided to go biking around town and meet up with friends for lunch. I stopped at the store on the way home for a few things and headed back home. When I arrived at my house, there were several cars lined up in front of it and there was even one in the driveway. I found this very strange, but it was summertime and there is always an increase in tourism, so I simply assumed it was people visiting the beach. I did not use my driveway, so I let it slide. But as I walked around the corner, I could hear voices laughing and talking loudly, and then there was the sound of splashing coming from the back. My mind was racing, having no idea what I was about to walk into. I came around the side of the house, standing outside my tall iron gate. I had apparently forgotten to lock it yesterday after I swam and tended the yard, to then see a group of 5 adults sitting at my patio tables and 3 children in the pool splashing and playing. The adults appeared to be having a good old time, with coolers and beers and white claws sitting on the tables. There was even a man trying to start up my propane grill. I heard one woman asking if there were towels that the kids could use because she had forgotten hers. One woman with the most entitled air about her says, "Oh, of course, those would be in the house. I'll have to get those for you in a minute." I finally spoke up. "Excuse me? Who are you? And why are you on my property?" I admit, I've always hated confrontation, but this is one of those times where you cannot just ignore someone trying to encroach upon your home. The main woman, let's call her TB for the Karen, she took off her sunglasses and stared at me. "And who are you?" Her friends are looking at me like I have 3 heads, and one even asked if she needed to call the cops for TB. "I am the owner of this house." She laughed and said, "Do you guys hear this woman? People are always trying this crap. Sweetheart, you must be confused. Your Airbnb is probably next door." Her friends chuckled along with her, chiming in and telling me to leave them alone. I did not leave and only watched in horror as these entitled people used my home like it was theirs. No, this is my house. I have lived here for a few years now. Honey, I know you're jealous, but I promise, I'm sure your rental is somewhere nearby. This woman was clearly not going to give up on this charade in front of her friends and family. I could hear some of them even congratulating her on being able to purchase such a nice house on the beach even after her terrible divorce. She then made a joke about how her ex-husband is the one who paid for it and got the whole group laughing again. And by the way, Ripe stars, this definitely sounds like a cheap wine-fueled Karen party. Anyway, she saw me standing there still and got up, walking over to me. She closed my gate on me and said, "You need to leave now, or you're not going to like it." She leaned in and whispered one last thing. "I will leave $100 on the table when we are finished." As she walked away, she said loudly for her friends to hear, "Okay girl, you're weirding out my friends. Please leave us alone." That is when I started thinking, you know what? I'm not going to tolerate this, but I would like to embarrass this woman. Without anyone noticing, I walked around the other side and casually locked the padlock to the gate. They are trapped now if they try to leave. You know what? I'm sorry. I think you're right. I must have the wrong house. I walked away as they talked crap about how dumb and crazy I was. They were about to see what happens when you side with a Karen like this woman. I called a towing company and had all of their vehicles removed from the front of my house. They could not see what was happening because they were at the back of the house and the cars were in the front. Thankfully, with their music and drinking, they did not notice the noise. That is when I made the final move to all the cops. When the police arrived, the drunk idiots had not even heard the sirens. 2 cop cars pull up into the now empty driveway and the front of my house. They asked me questions about the situation and I simply told them that I came home from lunch and found these people in my yard refusing to leave. One of the cops said that he had seen this many times. People just assume that these beach homes are only occupied a few weeks out of the year and then think that they can just get away with squatting there or using the pool for their own agenda. TB must be one of those people. She probably thought that she would be able to lie to her friends about it being her home and then they would just go to the beach when they were finished. The officers approached the gate and you could hear one of their walkie-talkies going off before they rounded the corner to the back of the house. TB must have heard that or gotten a whiff that was something up and the sound of scraping chairs on pavement could be heard as she started scrambling. "Get out of the pool!" she shouted at her kids. We finally could see them now. TB looked panicked and was grabbing as much of her stuff as she could. She was screaming at her friends to get their stuff and it was pretty obvious that they were completely shocked and confused by her behavior. "Ma'am," one of the officers called out to her. "Ma'am, stop grabbing things and come with us." She ignored him and ran to the other side of the patio to the gate, clearly thinking that she was going to make a break for it. When she realized that the gate was locked from the outside, she started scrambling to climb over the 6-foot iron gate. Her friends, kids and police watched with mild amusement and confusion as she foolishly slid down the iron bars, cursing and panting as she failed miserably. One of the police officers laughed his butt off as she got halfway up by standing on a chair and very ungracefully fell backwards, stumbling several feet until she landed in the pool. She flopped and sputtered, screaming for her oldest kid and boyfriend to help her because she could not swim. And she was not even in the deep end of the pool. The officers eventually went in after I unlocked the gate, pulling a very soggy and angry TB from the edge of my pool and putting her in handcuffs. She was drunk and belligerent, saying that she could easily sue me for this, which I know is complete BS. Her friends apologized and thankfully the children were able to go with their aunt who was there. Just like we had suspected, she did not think that anyone would return home to bust them using someone else's pool. I did not end up pressing charges on TB, but I did ask that she formally apologize for her crappy Karen behavior. And yeah guys, I'm curious, how drunk do you have to be to trespass on someone else's property, throw a pool party, and then not be absolutely terrified when the owner catches you in the act? And the next one is titled Revenge on My Employer. I worked at a customer service call center. I was there for 7 years and created 33 new or updated documents for them to use because I am highly trained in Microsoft Office programs, aka Word, Excel, etc. These documents were used at 3 different branches of the company in 3 different states. When I started having emotional problems and had to see a psychiatrist, they decided to get petty and tried to make me quit by treating me like crap. In other words, giving me the horrible shift hours, making me miserable, demanding I do extra work and then stating I was not going to be getting our yearly raise because my work ethics had become erratic. Although all of my coworkers were praising me for keeping up with their ridiculous demands. Anyone who has had issues with a company who does not want to have to pay unemployment benefits and would rather force you to quit will be highly aware of the type of tactics companies pull when in this situation. I had originally put a watermark on all of the documents, but when I became so emotionally drained from having to deal with their demands and actually had to check into a psychiatric institution for a 48-hour hold, I finally had enough. I knew I would not be coming back after I got out of the hospital, so right before I went to the hospital to check in, I deleted the only copies of 27 of the documents that were for internal use only, and then locked the last 6 with a password that I gave to one coworker friend who had already given her notice and only had 2 days left. 2 days during a time that none of the higher managers were actually present because it was the weekend. I ended up staying in the hospital for almost 2 weeks due to the emotional state I was in and because I was self-destructive by that point. During my 3rd day of the hospital stay, the company called my house 5 times trying to get a hold of me to find out where I had put the missing documents and what the passwords were for the locked ones. My family stated specifically that because they had driven me to the point of having to go into the hospital, there was no way that they were going to ask me for any information that had to do with the company. After the 5th call, my family told them that if they called again, they would report the company for harassment and stalking-like behavior. One of the managers actually tried to call the hospital to get a hold of me several times, only to find out that I was not allowed to take any calls from anyone besides my family. On one call, the manager tried to pretend they were family, only to discover that my family had given the hospital a list of my actual family members, just in case someone from the company tried this tactic. When I got out, the company called me 2 days later. When I picked up the phone, the person that had called had been one of the biggest perpetrators in the way that they had been treating me over the past month of my employment. I told her flat out that the documents were gone for good, as were the backups, and the password lock documents were set to delete after a month of when I had locked them. When the manager said they were letting me go, I said, "Thank you for the unemployment benefits," and hung up on her. Edit. This happened back in 2013. I also got to hear some very amusing stories from some of the people who still worked there about the managers having to try to recreate documents from scratch with only limited knowledge of office products and no real memory of what they had on them. The documents I had created were fill-ins and they could be tapped from one section to another to add the information exactly where it needed to be. I had everything from drop-down menus for standard selections, tick boxes, Excel tables that had formulas so the information or statistics were automatically calculated for them, and then sections that copied to any other place on the document/table that was redundant. As all companies have on that type of paperwork. They had no one who was proficient enough in Office to make those type of templates, documents and forms. The only reason that I was able to do it was because I had taken a college course just before I started working there that strictly focused on Microsoft Office programs. Also, to those who are trying to warn me about how the company could get back at me, the company never came after me because they knew I had too much I could use against them for their treatment of me. I simply documented everything and made certain they knew it by sending copies of everything to the CEO of that particular branch of the company. They also ended up closing that branch of the company about 8 months after I left due to some very serious accusations from several employees about the same type of treatment. Ironically, a couple of those employees called and asked me how to handle the situation when they started having to deal with the same thing. I told them to document everything, even down to the most minor maltreatment. That way, they had something to show as proof. And yeah guys, that was a surprisingly satisfying revenge story, and I'm curious, if you have ever worked in an awful job environment, have you ever gotten revenge on your employer? Let us know in the comments. And the last one is a bonus story from r/Tales from the Front Desk. It is titled, "I warned the hotel guest, but they did not listen." It is the mid-1990s, 6 AM, I just got to work. The night clerk told me about a man who had asked a bunch of questions about making phone calls from his room and the cost. He had planned to call home, this was in the US, he was calling the UK, and had been rather rude about it. She had offered him the flyer the hotel supplied with suggestions on how to make the cheapest calls, but he rolled his eyes at her and did not take it. Lucky me, he happened to be the first customer I encountered that morning. He told me his room number and then asked what his total was. I looked him up and groaned inwardly. His long-distance phone calls from the night before were all listed out to the tune of $1,900. With his room cost, I told him his total and watched his head explode. I expected him to freak out, but he surprised me by claiming the clerk that had checked him in said his calls would be comped. I involuntarily smirked when he said that because I knew they would never ever say that. He demanded to know what I thought was so funny. Me? Sir, phone calls are never comped or free. There must have been a misunderstanding. Guest: no, she told me last night. I swear it, and it's not okay for you to laugh at me. Me: sir, I apologize. I was not laughing at you at all. The idea of free phone calls just caught me off guard. Nothing is free. Guest then said, she said it was. I'm a VIP, you know. His account is not marked as VIP and he is not in an upgraded room. And I checked in late, so that's why they are free. If that's not the case, I will not stay here another night. Me: I understand the cost shocked you, but I know the clerk gave you the paperwork on other calling options. She specifically warned you not to use the room phone to call overseas. Guest now angrily smirking. Oh, you talked about me, huh? You cannot prove that she told me anything. She is not here, is she? It's my word against hers and I'm the customer. Me in a bold-faced lie. The clerk you spoke to is named Amelia and she is in the back closing up from her shift. I could go get her so we can clear this up now if you want. Guest: I don't want to talk to some clerk. I want the manager. You women are trying to rip me off. We women? Really? I smiled, thrust my chest out to show my womanly breasts. Sir, I'm the manager. He did not believe me at first and told me not to lie to him, and he then demanded my manager. Me? My manager? Betty, I made sure to say her female name loudly and slowly, is not in this week. She is on vacation. At this point, a line is forming behind him. I ask him if he wants to check out. Guest: check out? I'm here for another 4 days. Me: sir, you just said you are going to leave if you had to pay for your calls. They are not free. Tell you what, I understand the sticker shock, so I'll take $200 off, but since you were warned, the rest will need to be paid. Guest: oh wow, $200? Aren't you so generous? I just looked at him because yes, I was. He stomped away and got on the elevator. Later in the day, customer service transferred me a call from someone asking for the manager. When I picked up, the room number showed it was him. I answered in a sing-song voice and he recognized me right away. Guest: are you the only manager in this damn hotel? I want to talk to someone else. A man. Get me the owner. Me: sir, it does not work like that. The owner only comes to this hotel maybe twice a year. He doesn't live here. You can contact him, but not through this number. He then told me to F off, called me a fat witch and then hung up. I checked his room account and saw several more long-distance calls. His bill was now $3,200. I called my supervisor and told him I was worried he wouldn't pay and how he had been treating us. He told me to charge his card $2,000 towards the bill and to put his name down as who approved it. I happily did so as I was told, and it felt damn good when the charge went through. I was not there when the guest saw that we had charged his card $2,000, but I saw the security video later. He came down to the front desk red as a tomato and demanded to talk to me. He brought his heavy room phone with him and tossed it across the lobby. He shoved the concierge that tried to intervene and got tangled up with security before they got control of him. He was arrested and banned from the hotel. He also trashed the room, cut the TV, lamp cords, smashed the mirrors in the bathroom, flooded the toilet, cut up the sheets and bedspread, and dumped shampoo all over the floors and counters. A grown-ass man acting like a toddler. Edit: a lot of you are asking if he was charged with vandalism, and yes, he was. I know the hotel's legal team went after him, but unfortunately I left before it was resolved, so I'm not sure how it ended. My guess is he had to pay a buttload of money, and I am glad about that. And you know guys, one thing I'm always wondering about, who are these people that leave hotel rooms or even Airbnb rooms in such a messy state and pretty much actively try to make the room look as bad as possible to make the life hell for the room service? I cannot even fathom the logic behind this. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope to see you again tomorrow.